I love Jason Statham. I think he's the last actor that truly embodies the old school spirit of 80s action movies. And as a result, he stands out from the crowd as a total badass. I've loved him in every movie I've seen him in. I basically saw The Meg just because he was in it, and even though that movie sucked, he was the best part. Because I love Jason Statham's movies so much, I thought it would be fun to make a video series talking about all of his movies. It allows me to talk about how awesome Statham is, and it gives me a chance to see Statham movies that I've never experienced before. For me, if I'm going to do a series on Jason Statham, the only logical starting point is the franchise that really got his name into the mainstream, the Transporter trilogy. I have actually never seen any of the Transporter movies, despite it being Statham's defining role for a lot of people. About a decade ago, everyone I knew referred to Statham as the Transporter guy. Even I myself associated him with that franchise, even though I had never seen him in one of those movies. He was just the Transporter. That's who he was for a long time. It was basically his Jason Bourne trilogy, only if Bourne was played by the pinnacle of masculine energy. So I was really excited to watch this trilogy. Now, my criteria for a Statham movie is pretty simple. It just needs to be fun. Statham needs to be able to kick ass and be a badass in general, he should have one-liners, and he should pull really crazy stunts. Add to this at least competent filmmaking and a dab of self-awareness or a non-serious tone to the script, and you've got yourself a really fun Statham movie. For the Transporter movie specifically though, he needs to drive a cool car, perform crazy car stunts, and bonus points if there's a sexy girl in the movie. All that being established, let's kick off this barrage of Statham mayhem with the Transporter. The Transporter is boring. It was not what I was looking for in a Transporter movie at all. Jason Statham hadn't fully developed his action hero persona yet, so his performance wasn't really that fun or quippy. There's not a lot of action in the movie, and even though he does do some stunts, they're not the crazy kind of stunts he's known for today. That being said, the action is decent. There's one or two okay car chases, there's a few action scenes, but the best one is the one in the garage where Statham lathers himself in motor oil so thugs slip off of him when they try to grab him. It's a lot of fun to watch. Statham on his own isn't the issue with this movie, it's everything else. The plot is boring. Statham is a transporter who will transport anyone or anything as long as it complies with his rules, which I'm not going to list because not only do we not get a full list of them in the entire franchise, he also breaks them all the time, so it really doesn't matter. Also, FYI, I'm going to be spoiling all of these movies, so you've been warned. In this one, he finds out he's smuggling a woman for slave traders or something like that. This woman becomes a major character, and she's awful. Not only is her character terrible, but the Chinese actress playing her obviously couldn't speak very good English, because her line delivery sucks. In fact, her English is so bad that according to the trivia on IMDb, she didn't even communicate with Statham at all when the cameras weren't rolling. She was an annoying character that really weighed the movie down. Statham also doesn't get to drive a cool car in this movie. Granted, it's apparently a very rare type of car, but who gives a shit when it looks like any other old BMW? It's the Transporter, for Christ's sakes. If you're not gonna sell me on the plot, at least try to sell me on the character by having him drive a cool looking car. The technical aspects of this movie really weigh it down as well. The visual presentation is really bland and lacks any style to make it stand out. It looks like a standard early 2000s movie. But the worst part of this movie is the soundtrack. The soundtrack is fucking terrible. The soundtrack is so terrible that if you replaced it with stock music, the movie would actually be better. Any tension in the action scenes is undercut by this terrible music. To be completely honest, I might have actually been able to enjoy the movie if there wasn't terrible music in every scene. The first Transporter was just okay. I was really let down by it. Not only was it not the dumb fun action movie I was expecting, Statham really wasn't that entertaining in it because his on-screen persona was still being developed. This was, after all, a very early film in his career. Despite my disappointment, I was still really excited to watch the next one because of what I had heard about it. So let's talk about Transporter 2.
Impressive. Transporter 2.
This is what I wanted from the first movie. It's crazy, stupid, and really fun. Statham kicks ass in it, there's tons of action with ridiculous stunts, it has a B-grade Bond villain, and a hot blonde who runs around shooting people in her underwear. I love this movie. I was happy with this movie from the opening scene. The opening credits had their own style, as opposed to the last one which just ripped off the style of The Matrix. The way it was shot seemed more like a sleek action movie, and Statham beats up a bunch of dudes trying to steal his car while a woman in a skimpy schoolgirl outfit stares in awe. The entire time I was watching this opening scene, I was just thinking, this is exactly the kind of B-grade action movie I was hoping for. In Transporter 2, Statham is retired, but still gets paid to drive kids to and from school. He ends up getting caught up in the mix after the kid of a family he works for is kidnapped. As always, the kid actor in this movie is really bad, but thankfully, because of the aforementioned kidnapping, he's not in the movie very much. Alessandro Gassman plays the villain who plans to unleash a deadly new virus, and he is so great. Like I said, he's basically a knockoff Bond villain, but in the best way. His voice and personality is great for this kind of role, and he's the best villain of the entire Transporter series, or really, of any Statham movie that I've ever seen. Kate Nada plays the villain's sidekick. She's really crazy and really badass, on top of being sexy. Seriously, she spends most of the movie shooting people in her underwear. There's also a really funny part where she licks Jason Statham in the face. The scenes featuring her were some of the most fun scenes in the movie. She honestly reminds me of Panty from Panty and Stocking, if you're familiar with that show or have seen my video on it. Statham is great in this movie as well. This is one of his most career-defining movies. He's more comfortable in the role at this point, and as a result, he's more quippy and he looks like he's having a lot more fun than in the last movie. He also gets to do tons of crazy shit. He jumps from one building to another in his car, which was later redone in Furious 7, which he was also in. He jumps his car off a ramp to turn it upside down so a crane can knock a bomb off of his car, a stunt I feel was very much inspired by a similar stunt in the 007 movie The Man with the Golden Gun. And he crashes his car to get on a plane which starts spinning out of control as he has a fist fight with the villain. Have I convinced you that this movie is awesome yet? Now obviously this isn't a good movie. The plot is stupid, the writing is terrible, some of the acting is so bad it'll make you laugh, and some of the action sequences are blatantly unrealistic. But that's what makes this movie so fun. It doesn't care about making sense or about having a good serious story, it just uses its story as a vehicle to do crazy shit. If you liked the newer Fast and Furious movies, you'll probably like this. And this is a must-see if you're a Statham fan, because he really gets to kick ass in this movie. Now, let's move on to Transporter 3.
Transporter 3.
I was really worried about watching this one because I looked it up before watching it, and it was directed by the same guy who directed Taken 2 and Taken 3. If you know anything about those movies, you know how terrible they are and how badly the action is shot and edited. Unfortunately, all my worst fears were confirmed with this movie. The way this movie is directed and edited in a normal scene is obnoxious, but the action is edited so sporadically it's genuinely hard to watch. It sucks too because it's clear Statham is doing some really good fight choreography, you just don't get to see all of it. In Transporter 3, Statham is retired, again, and he's roped into another job by some random asshole who threatens to kill him if he doesn't do it. You know this is a bad Statham movie when his first scene in the movie shows him sitting on a boat in a lake, fishing. On top of the action being terrible, there's not a lot of action in this movie, and not a lot of stunts. The only noteworthy stunts in this movie are a scene where Statham chases a car on a bike and does some cool tricks, a scene where he drives his car on two wheels to pass some trucks, and a scene where he drives off the roof of a train. Statham is still great, but the rest of the movie is so bad that he doesn't do much to soften the blow. There's another character in this movie, I don't know what her name is and I don't care because she sucks. She does nothing the entire movie but sit inside the car and be an annoyance. The movie's plot is a bit of a repeat of the first one in that he's transporting another girl, but instead of letting you know at the beginning like the first one did, it treats it like a third act plot twist even though it's painfully obvious to anyone even paying the slightest bit of attention. And I would know about paying the slightest bit of attention because I played on my phone during this movie for a good 40 minutes because of how boring it was. It takes itself way too seriously and the pacing is really slow. It tries to set up a serious romance between Statham and this girl, but it doesn't work at all. On top of being terribly written in the first place, the actors have zero chemistry, and it's hard to get behind their romance when the girl is such a terrible character. She spends the first hour doing nothing but sitting in the car and creepily smiling at Statham whenever he has his shirt off. Then when she does get out of the car, she gets drunk. And at that point, she gets even more annoying. If all of this wasn't bad enough, She steals the keys to his car at one point and forces Statham to take off his clothes and have sex with her to get them back. And after being forced into sex, Statham lovingly holds her in his arms as if what they did was totally consensual. She literally commits sexual harassment and assault against Statham, and this movie expects me to like her and support her relationship with him. The romance in this movie is insulting to both the audience and Jason Statham. The female love interest is Harvey Weinstein levels of creepy, who stares at people perversely, then bribes them into doing sexual favors when she has the opportunity. Instead of being fun, this movie was a chore to get through. It could have been as fun as the second one had it not been directed by someone who's mentally retarded. That being said, because of how bad it is, there are some pretty funny moments in it. Like when the girl is trying to get Statham to have sex with her, this happens.
You're the gay.
Nope, I am not the gay.
It's so dumb, it honestly could be a meme. There were elements of this movie that could have been really good. The explosive bracelet on their hands that would go off if they got too far away from the car could have led to some great action scenes. Instead, it ended up being the reason Statham was forced into having sex. Stay away from this movie. If you love Jason Statham, this movie will upset you because he has shown no respect in this movie. Even if you like dumb fun action movies, there's not a lot of fun to be had here. This movie really isn't for anyone. Just don't watch it. That's the Transporter trilogy. One was okay, one was awesome, and one was cancer. I'm not going to cover Transporter Refueled because it does not have Statham in it. Obviously. I'm glad I finally got to watch these Transporter movies because they really were the defining staple of Jason Statham's career back in the early 2000s. There are still a ton of Statham movies for me to cover in the future, like the Crank movies, the Mechanic movies, his work with Guy Ritchie, and so much more. But until next time, I'm Randall the Vandal, and thank you so much for watching.